A few years ago, I made a video that showed my bike fleet, and I repeated that last year. So this is the third one that I'm making, so it's kind of becoming an annual tradition. In these videos, I show each bike that I own and talk about the type of riding that I do with that bike. Now, even though I show a lot of different bikes on my YouTube channel, and this is a year where I bought a couple bikes, done reviews, and then sold them, I keep my bike fleet down now to 3 bikes. It used to be 4. The last 2 times I made these videos, I had 4 bikes. Now it's down to 3, which I think is a really good quiver for my needs. So let me show you the bikes. I'll start off with my cyclocross / gravel bike. And this is why I only have 3 bikes now instead of 4. I used to have a cross and a gravel bike, but I felt like that was a little bit redundant. And you can see the video that I made called Why I Sold My Gravel Bike, which was a 9er RLT9 steel. I really like that bike, but the type of gravel riding that I do, a cyclocross bike fits the need perfectly. And again, I just didn't like having the redundancy. I like putting my money into other things, and so I sold that bike, and I'm down just now to this bike for cyclocross racing and for gravel racing. So I've been using this bike a lot lately for gravel riding. I use it a lot in the summertime when our trails are wet, and now they are trashed by a hurricane that came through. And so I put a lot of miles, like I said, in the summertime, and I'm also gearing up for the cyclocross season. So the type of gravel riding that I do is about at the most 70 to 80 miles. I might put in a gravel century from time to time, but I don't do super long, like 150, 200 mile type gravel rides, and I don't do multi-day rides where I need racks and fenders and panniers. And so that's why a cross bike really fits my needs. Also, sometimes I'll do group rides where the pace gets really high and you're accelerating and trying to keep up with the group. And so a cross bike is really the fastest bike that I found on gravel. And I also don't do a lot of gravel riding in the mountains. When I travel to the mountains, I'm going on trails. I'm bringing my mountain bike. So I don't need a really extensive gear range, so I just have a 1x system. But it is a pretty good range. So it's got an 1136 on the back, which is a really decent range. And it's got a 40-tooth chain ring in the front. And so because I'm not riding up long, steep mountain climbs, that's a really good gear range. And you know, having it be a 1x system really makes it simple. Also, I have found that the carbon on this bike is very compliant. This is a comfortable bike. Not only good for cyclocross race courses, but also good for gravel. Even my long 70-mile gravel rides, I feel like it's pretty comfortable. The seat post has a little bit of flex to it, and the fork is pretty compliant for a carbon fork. I also like the geometry of this bike. I don't feel like the angles are too steep. So the head angle is, I think, a 71.5, and a lot of gravel bikes that I've seen are around a 71, so very similar angles, so it's not too twitchy at speed. I think the biggest difference between a pure cross bike and a pure gravel bike is the bottom bracket drop. So if you were to draw a line from the front axle to the rear axle, how far the bottom bracket is below that line is referred to as bottom bracket drop. So a cyclocross bike has less bottom bracket drop, in other words, a higher bottom bracket, for the reason of being able to get over things and corner without hitting your pedal on the ground. I like that because I take this bike on trails sometimes, and I like being able to get over logs and things like that without worrying about hitting the chain ring on the logs. Also, a bike with a little bit higher bottom bracket kind of gives the feeling of the bike being slightly top heavy, so it's something you got to get used to if you're using a cross bike for gravel, but I'm very used to it. And I also like being in the exact same riding position on gravel roads that I am for cyclocross racing. An advantage of a lower bottom bracket, in other words, more bottom bracket drop like you see on a pure gravel bike, is the fact the bike just feels a little bit more planted, especially when you're going down a pretty fast, steep mountain descent on gravel roads. But since I really don't do that, the higher bottom bracket does not bother me at all. And I have my cross bike set up with 40C tires for my gravel riding season, which is about to end because I'm about to get into my cyclocross race season. So I have 2 water bottle cages, I keep a mirror on it, and I keep a seat pouch. So when I head to the cross races, I'll pull off this water bottle cage. I'll just keep on the front one. That allows me to shoulder the bike pretty well. I'll also change the tires out, so I'll put on some 32 or 33C cyclocross race tires. And then of course when I do my races, I'll just pull off the seat pack and the mirror and put those back on during the week for my training on the gravel roads. Now I'll move to my cross-country mountain bike, which is a 9er RKT9 RDO, full suspension 29er, 100 millimeters of travel in the front, 90 in the rear. And this is the bike that I use most for mountain biking. The area that I live, the trails are not that rugged, and a faster bike is a more fun bike on the type of trails. I love full suspension. I've ridden a lot of hardtails, but I am back to full suspension just because I like cranking hard in the saddle, not having to get up over every little bump. I do race this bike from time to time. I used to do a lot of cross-country mountain bike racing. I've switched more to cyclocross racing, but I do races from time to time. In fact, this season I think I'm going to mix it up a little bit more and do more mountain bike races and not chase the point series for cyclocross racing. I've won the point series for the past 3 years or so, so I might just mix it up just to kind of enjoy mountain bike racing, because I love racing. But when I am just out on the trails in my area in Florida, North Central Florida, this is the bike that I grab most of the time for mountain biking. Cross Country 29ers also make pretty good gravel bikes. It's not going to be as fast as a cyclocross or pure gravel bike, but years ago I used to use these kind of bikes on dirt roads. It wasn't until I got a cyclocross bike that I started getting away from using a mountain bike for gravel riding, but it does make a pretty good gravel bike, and it's obviously very comfortable. Like all of my bikes, this one is a 1x system, so it's kind of a custom Shimano. I do have an Ultegra cassette on this bike for local trail riding. When I go up to the mountains, if I were to take this bike, I have an XT, I think it's an 1142 that I would put on, but the Ultegra cassette lightens this bike up by probably half a pound. This is kind of a custom build, so I've got XT components and Stan's Carbon Valor wheels. I absolutely love carbon wheels. I've said that before, and these are some of my favorites. These Stan's Valors. The carbon wheels just make a bike very, very precise. In fact, all of my bikes have carbon wheels, and they're all set up as tubeless. And this bike, by the way, weighs a little over 23 pounds. Now I'll move over to my trail bike, which is a 2018 Trance Advance, and I've done some reviews on this, and I'll continue to do so. This is a bike that's a blast to ride. This one's about 27.5 pounds with pedals. So a trail bike in my local area, for the most part, is overkill. I have this bike for going to the mountains. I try to get up there several times during the year. This is the bike that I actually enjoy riding the most, because if I had to distill my favorite type of riding, I think it's trail riding. So I do, cyclocross racing, gravel riding, cross-country mountain biking, cross-country racing, but my absolute favorite type of riding is just riding up in the mountains, and this is the bike that I just have the most fun on. So this is the bike that I probably ride the least out of all 3 of my bikes, but it's the bike I wish I could ride the most. I wish I could ride in the mountains all the time, but for right now, I don't live in the mountains, and so I don't get as much time on this bike. But this is, since the bike is only 27.5 pounds, it's also a bike that's pretty good on cross-country trails. It's not as fun to me as my cross-country bike on pure cross-country trails, because I like going as fast as I can. But it's still good to ride, and we do get there's some technical type trail riding that we have around here. Not my local backyard trail, so to speak. I have to drive a little under an hour to get to some technical trails, but I like taking this bike. And as you can see, I do have flat pedals on this bike. I typically will run clipless. If you are familiar with my channel, I'm kind of doing a flat pedal challenge, trying flat pedals for a couple months and seeing how I like them. So this bike is 150 millimeters of travel up front and 140 in the back. I'm not going to go over the components because this video is not to do reviews, but it is set up as tubeless. The only thing I've changed on this bike is the tires. I've got 2.6 tires as opposed to the 235s that came on it as stock. I just like the bigger tire, but I still like the 235s. I mean, they're a little bit more nimble, but the 2.6s I like up in the mountains on the rockier terrain. And like I said, all my bikes are 1x setups. And so this is the new SRAM Eagle, the GX Eagle, the lower end price group set, which I'll do a review on. But so far I'm really liking it. It's got that massive 50-tooth cog in the back, so really don't need a front derailleur. Even churning up the big mountains, it's got plenty of gear. Some of the similarities between these bikes, like I said, they're all set up tubeless. They're all set up with 1x systems. They're also all carbon. Now this one is a carbon front and a rear that's aluminum, but the carbon front triangle really makes it feel like a pure carbon bike, saves a little bit of money. And like my other two bikes, this bike also has carbon wheels, and you know, I've said it before, once you get used to carbon wheels, it's kind of hard to go back to aluminum. The precision that you get in tracking and cornering with carbon is really hard to beat. This is the only bike in my fleet that of course has a dropper seat post, so really good dropper seat post. You can see it in my reviews that I do on this bike. And so that's my trail bike. And so that's my bike fleet. The first time I made this video a couple years ago, I had a road bike in my fleet. That's gone. I don't do any road riding anymore. I'll spend a little bit of time on the roads on my cyclocross bike when I'm connecting dirt segments, but other than that, I don't spend a lot of time on the road. All my riding is on dirt, which is the way I like it. These bikes really do cover pretty much the entire spectrum of the type of riding that I do. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.